Good afternoon. Welcome to Legal Tuesdays. I'm Monica Miller, Legal Director and Senior Counsel of the American Humanist Association. On this series, I answer your questions about separation of church and state that you've posted for us either on our social media platforms or via our online complaint form. The question I will take today comes from our online complaint form from a woman named Cara who says, can one be mandated by a parole probation officer to attend AA or NA, which is Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous? And if they can't and can only be mandated to self-help, can one be mandated to attend, quote, in-person self-help meetings, thus condemning most who live outside large cities to attend NA or AA? And the reason I picked this question is because although I actually answered a very similar question a few weeks back in episode 31, where I addressed the more general issue of the fact, to answer the first part of the question, which is no, the government cannot compel attendance to those programs because they center on a theistic truth claim that there is a supreme being, a power greater than yourself, and the literature also makes reference to a single God. And so if you want to listen to that answer, I do encourage you to go back to, I think it was episode 31. But I want to answer the more nuanced question because it has cropped up. And in fact, I actually sent a letter to Texas last week, Texas officials, for denying a would-be parolee the ability to leave because he will not participate in the religious aspects of AA or NA and is therefore stuck. So to answer the question about whether they can indirectly mandate AA or NA by saying we're only going to allow in-person meetings, the answer is still that that's not allowed because the questioner soundly pointed out, that de facto sort of excludes a large segment of the population who, because AA and NA are so prevalent and are probably in most cities and small areas, they cater to those that do believe in a higher power or a God, but those meetings do exclude atheists. And that's not to say there's not plenty of atheists that benefit from AA and NA and enjoy it and wish to go to it. But we see clients who do not want to believe in a higher power, cannot get past that first step, and also have issues with maybe some other components of it that have a religious backing. The government, if they require any sort of self-help as a condition of parole, they have to make sure that there's secular alternatives available. So if in that one town, say there's a prison and they're mandating in-person meetings and the only in-person meetings in that town are Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, then we would challenge that as being de facto unconstitutional because there isn't a secular option. There's not a ton of case law on the precise method of alternative secular program that has to be provided, but the case law that there is makes very clear that the secular alternative has to be actually made available and known to the parolees at the time they're presented with the option to do the treatment and get out early. They have to make the secular alternative known then. So it's like you can go to AA or you can go to Smart Recovery or in-person meetings. And if the only in-person meetings we have here are religious based, then we'll give you an exception and you can either bypass the whole requirement if we can't come up with something else, or we can sign you up with some online self-help meetings. For instance, Smart Recovery or Rational Recovery. I think there's some other online ones. And if they don't want to do that, then they have to, they cannot treat that inmate or that parolee differently from those that do want to do NA or AA. The case law is very clear on a general level that the government cannot treat you as a citizen differently because you don't believe in a God or gods. And that point is probably the most important or the most salient when you are in prison and you can't get out unless you agree to a religious program. That's kind of the highest form of coercion, short of the public school context where you've got really young school children. But the level of coercion that we're dealing with here in the prisons is in some ways higher because we're not talking about indirect coercion because of the young and impressionable age of school children. We're talking here about literal coercion, which is your only way of getting out of jail is submitting to a program where where theism or God belief or higher power belief is a central tenet. So I chose to answer this question even though I addressed a similar one recently, because I want to make it really clear to our members and supporters and anyone else out there struggling with this issue that there's no way the government can force you to attend these programs or punish you for not. So I will end there, but if you have any further questions, feel free to email us. Also, just remember to pose your questions in the comments or send us an email to the same effect.